Now, back in the day, I lived in London during the peak day game years. This was about 10 years ago. And this is what I saw. You'd see maybe 20 to 30 guys camped out like vultures on Oxford Street, all spam approaching the girls, saying basically a variation or the exact same thing. Hey, I just saw you and I thought you looked really nice. Pause. And I'd kick myself if I didn't approach you, or something like that. And the thing is, over a certain amount of time, guys tended to get more confidence in this approach, at least with the extra numbers, and they'd all end up approaching towards the hotter end of the scale. Not always, but a certain percentage of guys, no matter what their sort of inherent value is, would always end up approaching the really hot girls. Some guys would approach average girls and some guys would just approach everything, so-called spam approaching. And the one thing that unified these approaches was there was no what I called pre-approach routine. There was no sort of scanning around the environment to see if the girl had given you any kind of indicator of interest prior to approach. You were basically throwing shit at a wall and hoping it would stick. Now, by the time I started day game approaching in London, I was already pretty experienced with approaching and attracting women. Not so much in the daytime, but certainly in nightclubs. And so I realised the flaw in this method, so to speak, straight away, is that you were going to entail or incur a very high rejection ratio. For most guys, they can't handle it, it's not much fun, and it's a very low success ratio. And also, over time, the girls started to coalesce. They started to post in forums on Reddit and saying, are you getting all these guys approaching you? Often using pejorative terms like weird guys. And London began to get a bit of a reputation. Now, this method of approaching, this spam approaching, wasn't unique to London. I did a video yesterday about the death of day game in London. I suggest you check it out on this channel. But it wasn't just unique to London. So, after about 6 months of this, I decided to try and find a better way and to systematise a better way of approaching with a higher success ratio, less chance of a blowout and less emotionally damaging for you, and also more pleasant for the girl. And this was a method of warm approaching, largely based off of IOIs and a pre-approach routine. Now, at the time I got so into this was 9 years ago, I produced about a 6-hour video series doing a deep dive on what I called my method, the secret society. That is, trying to force a reaction, force an IOI from a woman, approach strongly with a kind of direct approach, and then a framework of the first 3 minutes, try and make a big impression, create sexual tension, get the girl's number, and hopefully, in creating a powerful impression, she'd be more interested in seeing you again. And the idea is to do away completely with spam approaching and basically build social calibration. Now, as part of this series, I remember when I did the seminar and I talked about IOIs being a portal into awareness. It sounds pretentious, but what that basically means is when you scan for IOIs as you're walking around, or you chat to a girl and she shoots a little IOI at you, it can be subtle or not so subtle. In doing so, you build what I called awareness. And the awareness is you can actually read subtle or not so subtle signals from the girl. This means that you are more likely to approach girls that are somewhat interested in you. And when you do approach, you can make a better job of it because you're reacting in real time to feedback that the girl is giving you. Now, why was this important? Well, it's important because guys, I used to train guys to approach women in the daytime, and I've noticed that they tended to run the same script, almost autistically, and they just say the sort of same thing again, regardless of what the girl is throwing at them. Another thing I noticed, astonishingly, was that most guys were incapable of spotting even the most blatant IOIs. I'm talking a girl, a hot girl, a 5'10" blonde girl could be walking down the street with a sign saying, I want to date your name, the guy in question, and he still wouldn't notice. Oblivious, totally oblivious. In other words, they had no awareness whatsoever. So what happened as a result of these spam approaches? Over time, London and other parts of the world became more and more hostile. I remember vividly, I'd go to places like Warsaw, Belgrade, Prague, the so-called day game cities, and you'd have, usually, especially in the summer, on a day like today, you'd have 20, 30 guys off a boot camp running there as well, and they'd literally burn the street down. And the girls got fed up of being approached to a certain extent. The whole environment became more hostile for day game spam approaches. And if you have seen the the Death of Daygame in London video I did yesterday, you will know that in England, they even invented a law to stop this kind of thing. It was codified, I think, 2 years ago. And it's actually a criminal offence, or I don't know if it's criminal, but it's an offence to sort of follow a girl with a sex interest in mind and try and block her from walking. So the famous Yad stop, or the London Daygame stop, can actually get you in trouble with the police nowadays, in England at least. So I did this video series 9 years ago. It's not just solely IOIs, there's a lot more to it. Obviously, if it's 6 hours long, there's a lot more that I go into. But that's basically the method in a nutshell. And without wishing to boast, I have to say that I feel vindicated now, all these years later. More and more guys are moving towards that method. I just checked some forums today, and there's guys that have a lot of hostility with reference to cold approach, the so-called jester maxing. Now, bear in mind, even prior to doing Daygame in London, I was interested in the game. I bought the book, and I was on all the forums. That's where it all began, the concept of jester maxing and the black pill. Now, I'm not going to name names, but basically luminaries of the Daygame method, where you spam approach or cold approach. There aren't many guys actually doing that method anymore. It's kind of died a death, largely because of some of the things that I've talked about today, but also, like I say, the law changes, the fact that women have far more options nowadays, jester maxing, and guys being simps, paying a lot of money. I never foresaw OnlyFans becoming a thing, but it sure as hell is nowadays. So the whole environment has changed. So I'm going to introduce you now to the cinematic overview of the evolution and basically the death of cold approach and the reasons why.
Standard modern dating advice almost always demands you play a numbers game. You see someone you like, you walk up, and you start a conversation out of thin air. No shared friends, no prior eye contact, zero social context. This gauge represents the structural problem. From a biological standpoint, initiating contact without any prior mutual awareness operates on a trust rating of absolute 0. Our brains are hardwired to assess strangers for risk, and a sudden approach triggers those alarms immediately. This creates an immediate imbalance. The initiator carries the entire burden of proof, forced to overcome deep-seated safety concerns and negative stereotypes in seconds. To compensate for this, the method relies on the law of large numbers. You have to approach dozens of people just to find a single receptive target who doesn't immediately put their guard up. Treating human courtship purely as a mathematical volume problem ignores the innate biological risk assessment systems that govern how we interact. When a woman is approached by a complete stranger without warning, her nervous system's default reaction is risk aversion. Her evolutionary safety mechanisms activate before you even finish your first sentence. This often leads to frozen compliance. It's a biological survival tactic where the body locks up, responding politely to safely escape a volatile situation. In the real world, this manifests as fake phone numbers and knee-jerk rejections. These aren't necessarily personal. They are tactical moves designed to end the interaction as quickly as possible. These approaches fail because they bypass the fundamental evolutionary signals humans use to establish safety. There is a scientifically grounded alternative to the numbers game. It's the invitation-based approach, and it's rooted in human behavioral ecology. This diagram shows the findings of Dr. Monica Moore. By studying social environments, she cataloged 52 distinct behaviors that humans use to signal accessibility and interest before a word is ever spoken. In the wild, these are indicators of interest. It might be a gaze that lingers for 3 to 5 seconds, or a slight shift in posture, so the torso is oriented toward the other person. Responding only to these biological signals creates a path past a target's threat detection alarms. It indicates to their brain that the interaction is socially vetted and expected. Recognizing these signals transforms an approach from a perceived threat into a safe, sanctioned interaction. But what happens when someone you want to meet doesn't organically provide one of these signals? Calibrated social actors use a sequence known as invitation induction. This is a series of physical movements designed to actively draw out a nonverbal signal from the other person. The first step is tactical proximity. This requires positioning yourself near the target at a parallel, shoulder-to-shoulder angle rather than facing them head-on. Moving directly into someone's space from the front triggers a predatory response. A parallel stance, however, communicates neutrality and allows you to enter their immediate space without triggering a defensive reaction. Step 2 is plausible deniability. You busy yourself with an external task, like reading a book, checking a phone, or browsing a shelf. By focusing on something else, you remove the perception of staring. You aren't hovering or waiting. You are simply an individual occupied with your own life. This spatial proximity and deniability creates a safe zone. It allows the target to observe you and evaluate your value without feeling hunted. Once the safe zone is established, you initiate the trigger. This is a subtle physical movement, like a slight shift in stance, designed to catch their peripheral vision. You then wait for the critical micro-moment where their visual focus shifts to acknowledge you. You catch this gaze, hold it for a fraction of a second, and acknowledge it with a light greeting or a smile before opening the conversation. Because the target's eyes found the initiator during the period of plausible deniability, the brain interprets the interaction as a natural sequence. The initiator isn't a stranger forcing a collision. They are a person simply responding to being noticed. Executing this sequence moves the interaction from a low-status chase into a frame of mutual selection. Adopting induction techniques represents a move away from the mechanical volume of the cold approach toward a more calibrated biological method. This prevents female self-rejection. Often, a receptive target will write off a man simply because he failed to notice her subtle nonverbal cues. By inducing the invitation, you ensure that connection is never missed. This diagram illustrates the funneling effect. Mastering these signals filters out unresponsive targets immediately, preventing you from wasting effort on dead ends. This mechanical filtering preserves massive amounts of emotional energy. It removes the friction of high-pressure rejections. A high-success approach is the direct result of working symmetrically with human biology, rather than fighting against it. Every interaction begins in phase 0. It is a silent, biological choreography that dictates the outcome long before the first word is ever spoken. Success is decided by the behavioral mechanics used to engineer an invitation, which carries far more weight than any specific opening line.